Good morning, everyone. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'm very excited to be sharing this presentation with you. Overall, this is my first presentation at any conference, whether it's virtually or not. I am a little nervous, a little anxious here to be able to present here in front of you, but overall, I'm very excited. So I want to thank you for sharing this excitement with me, even though, there are different times as we're living nowadays. But again, it's nice to be able to share this room with colleagues and share new information that I'd like to present with you. Alongside with me is Dr. Andy Brown, and we're going to go ahead and be starting their presentation now. So welcome. I am Beda Bjorn. I am a licensed mental health counselor here in the state of Florida. I'm also a PhD candidate with Capella University. I am currently in the Counselor Education and Supervision program, and I'm also doing a lot of assessments in community mental health agencies. So I'm very excited to share some of my trauma work and experience with you guys today.
Hi, Dr. Andy Brown, and happy to be joining Beda for her first go through for presentations, and such a nice venue to be able to do this in. And thankfully it's virtual because it seems like all my other conferences have been canceled. I'm an assistant professor here at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I also am the vice president of education for the International Trauma Training Institute. I do blogs probably like many of the rest of you, and I have my hands in a lot of other different things like probably a lot of the rest of you. So, and I'm happy to be spending my Monday morning with you.
That's right. It's interesting because I was thinking about how my social anxiety was going up, and I'm like, wait, I'm not going to be social right now. I'm not actually going to not be surrounded by anyone. So I'm wondering if there's this virtual anxiety happening right now. So it's a good way to get an understanding of how I work through it. So anxiety motivates me, and let's get going then. And Dr. Brown will lead us off this morning.
All right. Good morning. Those are like disturbing images to begin your Monday morning, right? And so I'm kind of used to them. I've desensitized myself to them. Actually, I have like stacks of papers to grade that are more disturbing probably than some of these images. And with all that we've got going on right now, it seems like this crisis state, we could probably put up one of those images of the COVID-19 to evoke even more anxieties. We want to take you on a journey this morning, and at the end of our presentation, we hope it's the beginning of something for you rather than the ending of our presentation. I hope to kind of inspire some thoughts around some of the foundational things that we're going to talk about with regards to neurology and its interplay with positive sexual experiences. But I'd like to kind of start with a story. I moved into a new townhome a few years ago, and when I first moved in, my friends, of course, wanted to come over for a cookout. And when you get something new, you want to keep it clean, you want to keep it nice, at least for a little while. You want to keep that kind of new shine to it and whatever. And I was thinking, oh, they're going to come in and they're going to walk back and forth between my front door and my back door, and we're going to track all this stuff. And I was thinking, well, around the side, maybe I can lay some stones, walkers, and so that people can walk around the outside of my townhome. Right beside my townhome, there's this like tall monkey or pampas grass. It's kind of decorative and what have you. And so I thought I'd lay the pavers around the side of those. So I started down on my hands and knees, laying these pavers. About halfway through, I got to this patch of monkey grass, and I looked over and there was a snake. So I jumped about 5 foot up and about 10 foot over, landed on my feet. And then I looked at it and more closely, and it was actually an old hose pipe. So of course, the very first thing that I did is I looked around to see if anybody else saw me, because who wants to be Jumpy Jumperton in their new neighborhood, right? They're like, ooh, check out the new guy. He's got some real like crazy jumps going on and whatever. And, but in that moment, that experience, my amygdala and my circuitry were firing just as they should. Your amygdala and that neurological capacity that we have to protect you, it was functioning. It was functioning. Man, was it functioning, doing its job, understanding underlying sexual experiences and where they intersect with trauma and the neurology better helps us to understand how to treat the clients that have been or have experienced sexual trauma. All right, Beda, if you will move forward. So part of what we talk about is neuroception. So of course, neuroception is our instinctual ability to protect ourselves, and sometimes, most of the time, it's based in rationale, but not necessarily. So a lot of our circuitry is based on our life experiences, and if you've had adverse life experiences or trauma, then some of the neuroception can reflect that. So when you go back and you think, like with the amygdala in the lateral nucleus of the amygdala, where the fight or flight is held, it also in that lateral nucleus holds sense-based memories. So when I was crawling around on my hands and knees, and out of the corner of my eye, the corner of my eye caught something that looked like a snake. The rational mind didn't have a chance to say, hey, that's not a snake, that's a hose pipe. Because if I waylaid, and I was able to pause that part of my mind, if it really was a snake, I'd already be bit. So that lateral nucleus with the sense-based memories helps the amygdala fire so much more quickly than going to the cortex, which takes a while to access. And if we did that, we would be in more wrecks, more accidents, and of course, we'd be bit more. Okay. Thank you, Beda. George Costanza, my favorite anti-hero hero. And this came from one of the old Seinfeld episodes where he was saying, I can sense the slightest human suffering. And I can kind of relate, because if I walk into a party or something like that and someone's in distress or whatever, there's something in that sense-based memory of me, maybe it's just being a therapist for so many years, where I pick up on someone else's distress. And we have that capacity, going back to that, the neuroception that we have. We are aligned, or we have the motor and the mirror neurons aligned in such a way that when we see things, we can feel them or sense them. So when we go back to being able to kind of sense things in split seconds, it comes into and waylays through that neuroception, which is basically informed by our experiences. In a research that was pretty interesting, done a few years back, it's probably 10 years ago now, they had a lady stand in the middle of a terminal, and in the process of 1 minute, she looked at her watch 4 times, and she patted her foot. She did things to exude anxiety. 8 out of the 12 people began to exhibit some of the same patterns of anxiety that she was exhibiting within a 2-minute period of time. There was a lot of things that were taken from this research, but going back to those motor and mirror neurons, what it kind of shows us is we begin to emulate those around us. So it's really kind of interesting how we can kind of pick up those things, and also really pertinent to understand that as therapists, that we pick up and absorb a lot of what our clients are going through, whether we're aware of it or not. And even if we have really strong emotional boundaries and what have you. So something that's very important to kind of consider, particularly as we're looking at the intersection of sexual experiences and trauma. Okay, Beda, if you will move forward, thank you very much. So here we're looking at the amygdala, which is kind of the centerpiece for the fight or flight mechanism. It's also where sexual bonding takes place. It's where the fight, flight, or freeze response takes place. It has, a lot to do with how we respond in an instant to things. It's incredibly sensitive to experiences. It's how it learns. Now, keep in mind, whether it's logical or illogical, it will pick up and kind of learn things. That's really important, an important piece, because when you've been through trauma and you've had trauma experiences, they're not always rational experiences that we have when we're being traumatized. And so the amygdala is picking up these things, and then we can begin to react in a way that's in alignment with the trauma rather than with irrational or healthy reactions. So this kind of helps us lay the foundation or the lens through which that we see sexual trauma, understanding the amygdala. The amygdala can be found if you were, and I don't recommend this, but if you were to put your finger through your eye and through your ear, where it would intersect would be approximately where the amygdala is. The amygdala is properly named. It looks like an almond, and that's what the Greek is for amygdala. It is almond. And there's actually one on either side of your brain. It's bilateral. Okay. Thank you very much. One of the things that we know about the amygdala, and this is really important and crucial for shaping the amygdala and what have you, is that it's, as I was sharing earlier, experiential. It learns through exposure. So down in the South and the Southeast, we have sweet tea. I am incredibly culturally sensitive, or I try to be, and recognize that other places that I go and travel to and work and present at don't always have sweet tea. I ask anyway, and some people kind of give you this look like, why would you want to do that to your tea? And I was like, why wouldn't you? And so they always bring out a pack of sweetener. They put, maybe a pack of sugar, what have you, and I pour it in the unsweet tea, and it just kind of trickles to the bottom. Because the problem with the tea is, unless the tea is piping hot, unless it's really hot, the sugar won't melt into the tea. It just sinks to the bottom. Well, with the amygdala, unless it's warmed up, it won't reshape. So one of the things that we look at in correcting irrational reactions in the amygdala is we want to actually rewire the amygdala. But in order to rewire the amygdala, we have to warm it up. We have to warm it up, and then we can reshape it. That's where exposure comes in. As we kind of progress forward, Beda's going to lay the foundation or the core pillars of the lens that we kind of look, kind of to shape your lens, the lens that you look through with regards to sexual experiences, what to look for when you're seeing this with clients and what have you. And as you're thinking through these core pillars, keep in mind that if any of these are upset along the way with someone's traumatized experience, that's something that may need exposure therapy as you kind of progress forward. And I'm not saying and advocating straight behavioral type therapy, because there's a lot of different ways to kind of get there. Exposure means a lot of different things for different people and can be done in a lot of different contexts. Even with the CBT and word person-centered therapy, when you begin talking about something that you've been through or experienced, it is in a way exposure. So now we're going to kind of move forward, and I'm going to turn this over to Beda so she can go through some of the pillars.
Thank you so much. Absolutely great information there. So I hope this is already gearing you into a curiosity state, getting a better understanding of how this amygdala function works and how do we help our population of survivors of sexual trauma start to feel in a more healing process. So what I'd like to touch on is something called arousal nonconcordance. So what I want you to picture is that imagine you as a clinician has been able to gain a giant milestone with your client that you were able to achieve an area of cognitive resolution. So what I'll be doing in the next few slides is I'm going to be presenting these core pillars. There are 5 of them, and I'm going to be embedding some of this arousal nonconcordant experience to help the survivor, for you to be able to help the survivor to find that behavioral resolution. So what do I mean that behavioral sexual response is? So remember a time, could have been with anyone, could have been someone very close to you that you guys were tickling each other, or they were tickling you as a way, maybe it was flirtatious manner, or as a way to connect or bond or share that experience of connectivity through that physical touch, right? So at first, typically the tickling experience tends to be, it may look fun, it looks like we're laughing, it looks like we're enjoying ourselves, but for the other person, they're not understanding whether it's starting to feel uncomfortable for you. So if borderline crosses the line, it can cross a boundary if the person does not understand that, hey, you've had it, you're not interested in being tickled any longer. So at that point, you know, you're starting to feel a little bit vulnerable. You're starting to feel that you're becoming furious and not understanding why this person is not understanding that you're done getting tickled, right? So at that point, you want to be able to let them know that you're furious about this and about this behavior, but your body language is still not relaying through. So as Dr. Brown mentioned earlier in the previous slides, it is very important to be able to understand the function, the mechanical function of the amygdala and how it produces these reactionary responses to reduce the potentiality of cognitive distortions that are assimilated or they're associated with these physiological responses. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'd like to focus on the sexual stimulus or the stimuli. So the arousal nonconcordance is an involuntary physiological response. For instance, another example I'd like to mention is we have known of cases that, for example, some individuals need to be asphyxiated in order to climax, right? So whether they may have resolved the cognitive piece in that area, they may feel that there's still a need in order to feel that satisfaction through this risky behavior. So our presentation is helping you to help the person gain a sense of safety, gain a sense of understanding where maybe these behaviors are becoming too risky per se. Okay, so as I start with the first pillar here, it's safety. This is through the cognitive processing therapy protocol developed by Razik, Monson, and Shard in 2014. So not only survivors of sexual trauma are able to benefit from this protocol, but any individual experiencing any traumatic event really digs into the cognitive resolution piece. So as you see here, I'd like to depict some of the information from Jenny. Jenny is the character in the movie of Forrest Gump. So what I wanted to do is grab pieces of her character for us to be able to conceptualize some of these pillars in a way to bring about some of the information about the cognitive piece alongside with the arousal nonconcordance piece. I think it's really important to help for clinicians to be able to really assess and gain a better understanding of the resiliency factors of your client. If you notice that their cognitive processes are more flexible, positive, constructive, you're going to be able to notice that you can step into the aspect of resolving the behavioral aspect of this. So what is self-safety within the person? You're going to notice for individuals who have not been able to resolve some of these aspects of their trauma, they're going to experience chronic and persistent anxiety. You're going to notice that their anger reactivity tends to be a little bit more, it's easily triggered. It's something that's going to be coming about much easier or in a very instant moment. So for you, the clinician, I really find that it's important to be able to mitigate how the survivor is able to accommodate these sensations, whether it's the physiological response, whether it's the emotional response, or the cognitive response. So as we mentioned, the survivor starts to find ways in this self-safety part, they're going to start to try to predict if there's more danger happening. So by them trying to predict if there's more danger happening, they're going to be a lot of the times into paying more attention if there's future victimization events are about to happen. Because if they know how to predict it, then they're able to protect themselves, right? So in order to be able to protect themselves, they're going to find every avenue in order to maybe start to avoid certain situations. So we've noticed some of that hypervigilance right there that some of our clients may experience. So unfortunately, this tends to be a vicious cycle. This tends to recur and unfortunately starts to confirm that there's danger everywhere around them. So this kind of goes back to what Dr. Brown was mentioning about the amygdala and how we pair a situation and a behavior. So anytime that you're going to notice that someone's going to come and tickle you, you're immediately going to put up a barrier right there. You're going to say, nope, no more tickling for me. I've had enough of this, right? And so in these pillars, it is addressing how the person's able to stay safe within themselves alongside with others. So some symptoms associated here with the person's inability to be safe with other individuals, you're going to notice those phobic responses, avoidant responses, more isolated behaviors, and a little bit of what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation is that neuroception. So how we start carrying these instances that confirm these irrational beliefs. So the brain is picking up this thread again. So it's picking up, not letting the new experience happen in a natural way, rather than I'm going to make sure I'm going to stop this and protect myself because I wasn't able to protect myself in the past. Okay, so we're going into the trust model here. In this dimension, this is the second pillar that is very important for us as clinicians to help the survivor to start achieving experiences that are safe for them, that will be able to help them trust these sexual experiences. So in a way that we're looking, the survivor at times has a lot of challenges in finding ways to trust a new partner, trust a sexual experience, trust their own judgment, and being able to say, okay, if I get into this relationship or if I sleep with this person, am I going to be able to trust myself again? Am I going to be able to trust others when it comes to these sexual experience? So what I want to bring back into the story here is, I remember when I was a kid, and as kids, if someone promises something, boy, are we going to be able to hold them accountable for that, right? So was there ever a time when you wanted something really badly? Maybe your parents, your mom, your dad, a caregiver, or someone that you really cared for, may have promised something, but yet they failed to deliver. This is shattering. I mean, imagine our survivors, if they already have difficulty in trusting, imagine this experience from an early childhood age. So how were you able to assess that you can trust them again? What were your criteria in order to be able to say, well, let me see if I can trust this person again, right? So let that sink in. How was that experience for you? So by you thinking about that moment when you were disappointed, imagine the hurdles and the trust, the inability to trust another person again, coming from the survivor's point of view, from their lens, right? Very challenging. This shapes a lot of our views. This shapes our ability to how we view others. In reference to the self-trust, so you're going to notice those intense feelings of self-betrayal. They're going to be able to say, well, my decision making did not work this time. I'm not going to be able to trust that I go to this place or be with this person. And I'm not going to be able to trust that I just doubt that this experience is going to go well for me, and not expect any danger to happen in the future. A lot of confusion, a lot of emotions that are happening there. Therefore, going back to the previous slides, that anxiety is arousing again. So for the survivor, this is a deep vulnerable state for them. Causing a lot of fear, causing a lot of unpleasant events, therefore further repressing their healthy sexual decisions here. So imagine, let's go back to that promise. So if your parents or that person went back to you and said, I promise I will never do that again. I promise I will not hurt you like this again. How do you judge that that's really going to happen, right? How do we expect this to happen? So in the case of Jenny, she was constantly disappointed. She was constantly in a place where it was unsafe for others, unsafe being around others, other than being with maybe Forrest, for example. Forrest was that trusting experience that she was able to have. As I put in the slide earlier in one of the pictures, that she was there with him, and she, in a way, knew what was safe, what was not, what was trusting, what was not. And it was still confusing for her. if you guys have watched the movie. A lot of great elements in there as well. Okay, so in trusting with others, so I really want to relate this pillar here in reference to others to an earlier experience with my boyfriend. So he's currently my husband now, but back in the day, we were able to go to college together. We shared a lot of similar experiences. We went to college football events. We went, more socializing alongside with schoolwork. That was always in there at one point or another. But so I had roommates, and so some of these roommates had friends. So these friends tend to mingle. We all talked with each other, but then I started to notice that some of these friends were talking to him a little bit more. So then I started to self-assess myself back then, and I realized that, my previous experiences with previous relationships before him, I was cheated on. So for me, my gosh, seeing these girls go walk up to him, just having a cordial conversation and a friendly conversation was extremely challenging for me. I wasn't sure how to understand this behavior, right? So I had to talk to him about that. I had to say, listen, I just want to get a better understanding of what's going on here. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be vulnerable. I'm really placing a lot of trust in you. And I want to have a sense of a secure relationship with you. So at that point, I knew that I was able to decide to continue to trust him because he was able to lower a lot of my fears down. He was able to reassure how I felt that is normal to feel that way, but he was able to reassure his feelings for me. So that intense listening that he reflected back to me, I thought that was like, it wasn't necessarily the behavior of the girl speaking with him. It's just that reassurance that he was able to portray right back to me helped me to trust others, right? So not let me run away from this relationship before I even get close, which tends to be a very common symptom associated with survivors of sexual trauma or survivors of traumatic experiences. Okay. As we're working forward, we're diving into the third pillar, power and control. So what is power and control when it comes to the traumatic experience? So as we see here, power is associated with our beliefs and our capacity for self-growth. So how are we resilient within ourselves? How are we able to use our skills and talents in a way that help us supersede new experiences, right? In relation to the interpersonal relationship associated with others, this is a belief that you're wondering how things may turn out with your relational experience. So the story I want to add to this. So I wonder if some of you guys have ever experienced a borderline toxic, over-controlling boss, may have experienced maybe some borderline bullying and harassment. So what we may have noticed is, for me, I had this boss. I had a boss that was extremely, she would come to the office just immediately marching in, flat face, ready to tackle on the day, very hard worker. But what I noticed is that she was just very high stress, extremely demanding, I would say. This was the banking industry. So before I got into the counseling field, I was in the banking industry. So I was able to gain a little bit of understanding of that piece. So it's a money-driven environment. So no time for feelings, no time to see how you're doing. There's no time to check in on how you are. So this person, they got to the point where she would come up to you and even poke you in your shoulder and say, why are you doing this wrong? So not only she's crossing this professional boundary and she's crossing this physical boundary, she's intimidating me by putting me on the spot in front of everyone and really overbearing her power and her control onto me. So that was really unpleasant. That was really, it took a big toll when it came to my self-esteem as well. I wasn't sure if my decisions were good. I wasn't sure if I was handling my work experience right? So come to find out, we fast forward to this, she took me to lunch one time because I was leaving a company, and she let me know that she has an autistic son. So her life at home was totally out of control. She felt that she couldn't control this diagnosis. She couldn't control how to support her son. And so for her, this was distressing. So for her, being able to control something, which was at the office, that was her way of resolving. That was her way of coping, right? So I'm wondering if you guys ever had, I hope you guys didn't get to that point, but I'm wondering if you had that toxicity in your environment. So that could be quite challenging. I'm glad I'm in the counseling field where if I say I need to take a mental health day, if I say I need to resolve some of my concerns, then it's something that is valid. It's valuable for my supervisor. So big experience here. So in reference to the self-control portion, it is extremely paramount to be able to share with and guide our clients to increase self-compassion. Self-compassion thoughts helps to steer away from these self-critical thoughts. So as I mentioned to you guys in my previous experience with my boss, my self-esteem, my ability to doubt myself was getting bigger and bigger as the time went on in my experience there. So without the self-compassion, the survivor is going to not understand what it is to have, to remove themselves from pervasive hopelessness, to remove themselves from this depression. You're going to notice that sometimes they're going to numb feelings. They're going to be passive. And some self-destructive patterns. So some of the survivors, you may have noted that either encounter when it comes to maybe self-harming behaviors and maybe those risky sexual behaviors, hyperpromiscuity, when it comes to maybe additional substance abuse, alcohol. It has been found that women who are survivors of sexual trauma or any trauma experience per se, they tend to be more of an alcoholic. So they're going to find those methods of relief to be able to take away that emotional sting. So in reference to power and control with others, it is important to be able to, it is essential to resolve this cognitive piece to be able to address the arousal not concordance. So when it comes to the survivor in wanting to resolve this behavioral component, it is extremely important to be able to help them communicate with their partner. Similar to, like I mentioned earlier, when it came to my boyfriend and friends, communicate what is going well, what is not going well, in order to reduce those heightened fears, heightened anxiety. So again, like I mentioned, intently listening from that partner is highly important. So some of the things to be able to relate to the partner is what would make the survivor's sexual experience more enjoyable, consensual, desirable, right? So some things to think about is creating a plan with your client. So what would it mean for them to feel that they can exert their power and control and their sexual needs in a healthy manner, in a positive way? So for instance, some may want to choose to have their lights on while they're having sex or their sexual experience. Some of them will probably prefer to schedule sex at a time that where they feel it's designated, that they can feel they can properly, emotionally, physically, and mentally prepare for this sexual experience, right? Something important to consider. So while something that could be, for some, it could be a nice experience, such as coming up to you behind you and kissing your neck. For the survivor of sexual trauma, this could be extremely horrifying. This could be something where they will make them jump inside. So we want to minimize these arousal experiences that accidentally takes them back to that traumatic event. So letting them know about these specific triggers and helping them resolve how to communicate it will be able to help them ease some of this experience, this arousal part. Again, exposing themselves slowly but surely, like Dr. Brown was talking about, and starting to work down that heightened sense and more accommodate into the healthy, pleasurable experience, consensual experience. Okay, so self-esteem. So this is the fourth pillar that I'll be talking about in reference to the cognitive processing protocol. Very important to be able to understand how we resolve ourselves and how we resolve our self-esteem with others. So it is about how our self-worth is, how our ability to be with ourselves and be able to value other people. Specifically, it is important to take a look at our stereotypical beliefs, any rigid beliefs that we may have arise to as a result of a traumatic experience. As an example that I like to put out there again, so I'm putting a lot of myself out there with you guys today, but I think it's, hey, we're all in a sensitive topic, so I'll put myself out there. So I remember a time in high school that I really went through a phase where I wouldn't stop shaving my legs. Boy, I mean, I would not leave the house without shaving my legs. I will not go anywhere without shaving my legs. I remember playing volleyball. I'm a volleyball player here, so I don't know if some of you are volleyball players. So always in shorts, always having to, and in Florida, I mean, we're constantly, you know, it's very hot down here. So we're going to be able to wear more shorts, skirts, things like that. So it came to a point where I think I was getting razor burns so much. I was just like, I didn't care. I needed to make sure that not one hair was on my legs before I left that house, right? So, and it came to, there was one day, I think we were at an away game or something like that, and we were finishing up with our game and wanting to leave, and I did not have my razor with me. So I started to freak out. I started to panic. I started to have all these intrusive thoughts and beliefs about myself, and realized that I was just panicking because I did not have my razor, because I thought that my legs were extremely hairy right here, right? So I guess it took my one friend there in the team to be able to help ease these fears down by validating my experience, that saying, hey, what are you talking about? You're fine. You have no hair. I don't see anything there. So I think that, you know, having my friend ground me and helping me see things in another perspective is another form of a relational experience. So yes, we're talking about the sexual experience, but we're talking about how these connectedness, how these bonds really, really helped to us to connect ways into our mind to be able to reduce this intense self-criticism, to reduce these inner experiences that are so critical for us. And so at that point, I was able to step away from the razor, and I was able to say, I don't need my razor to be able to feel good, to be able to feel confident with myself, to be able to have worth, to have people's approval, right? When it comes to the self-esteem for survivors of sexual trauma, it is highly important to be able to take a look at what are the major themes that the person is experiencing. By taking a closer look at that, we're going to be able to take a look how the shame and guilt cycle is really interfering with their functioning. So it's going to be very important to look at what are the aspects and destructive behaviors that are happening as a result. In the previous slide, we noticed that Jenny she's singing in front of an audience and she's naked. She's just wearing her guitar out there. And for her, that is her way of exerting what she feels that her sexualized way has been the only way that has taken her through life. So this assumption for her, feeling that only her sexual experience, people will take her talents, her skills seriously. It's very irrational, destructive way of thinking, right? Not saying that, you know, our beautiful bodies are not, that are distorted. No, I'm not saying that in any way. And what I'm trying to say is, how do we accommodate her sensuality, her sexuality, to be able to be healthier and in a less risky perspective? Okay. And the dimension of the same within others. So this is when you're going to notice that the individual will start with these rigid beliefs. So are they really, what do they really want? You're going to notice more isolated behaviors are starting to happening here because they're concerned that people are only out for themselves. They only just want, they only have hidden intentions. Nothing really good is about to come out of that. So the socialization is hindered, whether the relational experience is hindered, whether it's romantically, whether it's with friends, whether it's family members, whether it's colleagues and community members per se. So to resolve the arousal non-concordance piece, the behavioral aspect in this dimension, it is highly important for the survivor to regain a quality of trust by engaging in love and compassionate behaviors towards others. So maybe talking to a new person every day, how to foster that healthy relationship, how to know what is the healthy parts, and maybe helping that client to take that risk to be able to trust someone, to be able to share a loving experience with them. So, hey, you know, and again, going back to my shaving experience, who cares? Whether I have the hair or not, you're gonna love me for who I am, right? Okay. All right. So as we are arriving to the fifth and final core tenet here of the cognitive processing therapy protocol, intimacy has to be part of this. Whether, again, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's a romantic intimacy, whether it's a self-intimacy, whether it's someone that you care about intimacy. And taking it back to what is going on in this present day. So this pandemic has been an extremely valuable time to take a look at ourselves, and can we be self-intimate with ourselves? Are we able to be alone without feeling lonely, which is such an important component in reference to others. So are we able to be surrounded by that person that we care for, whether it's a friend, romantic partner, and be around them, feel connected with them, or not being disconnected? Because we could be around a million people at the same time and still feel lonely within ourselves. So what this experience is telling us is that it's an opportunity in the current day to be able to learn how we're coping, to be able to understand through our reflective ways of what are our basic needs, what are those core areas that we really have longed for to help foster again. And so helping the clinicians are going to help to be able to assist these survivors to feel internally comfortable when it comes to the self-intimate piece and when it comes to be intimate with others, helping them to reduce the arousal non-concordance when it comes to the sexual stimuli in a negative way and start accommodating it in towards a healthier way. As you notice, some of the symptoms I've combined both the self-intimacy and the intimacy with others here, that inner emptiness is something to look out for. Sometimes that loneliness piece can be addictive. So it is how we help the survivor to start breaking that addictive cycle. It's highly vicious and it could really, really interfere in many ways. You're going to notice in reference to intimacy with others, they're going to be possibly finding needy and demanding relationships. So how do we let them know what are the red flags, what are the green flags, so they can start going more in the healthier direction? Reducing isolated behaviors and increasing that emotional connectedness with their partner. Very, very important. Okay, and so in the case of Jenny, to help to reduce that arousal non-concordance, it's working on the symptoms of panic. And with your clients, what I recommend with you is how to help to bring about that relief. What are the action plan that they can take on to when they know they're about to be intimate with someone, how they can start resolving these aspects, right? So we know there's many aspects that happen in reference to Jenny in the movie. We know that there's many more things that happen as a result of this. But what I wanted to bring about today is, as a result of resolving the cognitive portions, you're going to be able to resolve the behavioral stimulus, that sexual experience, by accommodating the arousal non-concordance into a more healthier arousal experience, to that pleasurable, desirable, consensual experience. Through these 5 core tenets, we're going to be able to destigmatize positive sexual relationships in survivors of sexual trauma. And I want to thank you guys for letting me share this information with you guys today. I am moving now into the intervention portion of our presentation. And I hope this really sticks with you, and I hope this really helps you to see how we can start resolving these arousal experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beta. Outstanding job your first time through. I wish my first presentation would have been that solid. So I know it takes a lot to do these first timers up. So if you remember back in the beginning of my conversation, I talked about nearly being bit by the hose pipe. What was interesting is the next time that I went into a Lowe's home improvement, I walked over near the garden section and I walked into this room full of hose pipe, and it kind of took me aback initially. I was like, what, you know, and it surprised me. My reaction, if you've ever had that where your reaction actually surprises you. And I hadn't even been bitten by the hose pipe. It was not really a snake, but it still got into my circuitry and in that this was a threat just from my startled response. And then what I thought is, what if it had really been a snake? What if I had been bitten? What if I'd been traumatized? So when we look at sexual traumatization, and when someone goes through that, what we're looking at is someone in this situation who has been snake bitten, someone who has been traumatized. And so remember, the amygdala learns through experience. It's incredibly experiential. During a trauma, the amygdala is on fire. It's red hot. It's very moldable and shapeable. And what wires together, fires together, wires together, and these circuitries become embedded, and everything that kind of happens in that sexual experience, irrational and rational, gets kind of bound together. What happens after that is the brain begins to scan the environment for threats. Just like when I walked into Lowe's and I saw those hose pipes, my brain began to scan the environment for potential threats, and the hose pipe now is a threat. In a situation where someone's been sexually traumatized, then they begin to scan their environment for threats, whether they're irrational or irrational. And when they enter future sexual relationships, sometimes things can trigger them and they go back into that triggered state. And we see that quite often with people who have been sexually traumatized. But there is a way to begin to change the way your brain scans its environment. What we see with research that's based on the 3 gratitudes, Beta, if you will move us forward, and thank you very much. Thank you for speaking of power and control, thank you for controlling the PowerPoint as we walk through this. So we're looking at the 3 affirmations, and the way that this kind of works is such. So I encourage healthy self-touch first, non-sexual, and you can actually follow along. Find a place on your body that is a non-sexual place on your body that ultimately feels very safe to you, and touch that area. What you're going to do out of that is you're going to find 3 different things that's very positive about the experience. It can be sense-based things, how it feels, why it feels safe, anything surrounding the experience that's positive, but you want 3 positive experiences about that touch. The next time you do it, we recommend this at least once a day. You may progress to a place that's slightly more uncomfortable at your own pace, but also recognizing what's positive about it, not just the negative sensation, but what's positive about it. You want 3 positive new affirmations each day. So what happens, your brain begins to look for what's good and what's positive rather than what's wrong. You already feel the discomfort, but you're going to want to feel the positive aspects of what's happening. You can do this in the context of another relationship. As a caveat, though, it's imperative that that's a safe relationship. If it's not a safe relationship, remember that the amygdala pairs rational and irrational, and you don't want further pairing of unsafety with regards to sexual experiences. So this is something that kind of you can take with you. It's very simplistic. Again, it's based kind of on what we get with the 3 attitudes, 3 gratitudes, 3 attitudes of gratitudes. And the important piece there is that they're positive, and there are 3 new ones each day. Why? Because what we see even with the 3 gratitudes is if you do the same 3 gratitudes after 3 or 4 days, there's no real change. The brain's not really scanning the environment, it's just repeating. It's going back into memory sense and what have you. So by looking for something new each day, it has to scan the environment more rapidly. What's going on? Why is this positive? Why are these sensations positive? So going back through as we look at our total slide set today and what we're talking about with desensitizing, destigmatizing positive sexual relationships. For people who have been sexually traumatized, they don't always anticipate or look or experience sexual relationships as positive. We have to work with them on getting them to the place where they can experience a positive sexual relationship and to know and to believe that those can happen. This is just one intervention. There are many, but this one intervention that would help someone begin to change the way their brain scans their environment as it relates to sexual and positive sexual experiences. So we have a few minutes left now, and we would like to open up for questions, preferably any ones that we could actually answer. So feel free to, and if you want to put in a question in the chat, we will try to answer in the chat, or you can just speak out. Will the PowerPoint be provided to us? That's a really good question, and I am unsure if it will or not, because we're not actually hosting this, so we're not sure exactly how this will, how the information will be cascaded out. We were asking our monitor, our room monitor, I think she's under Dr. Catherine Stower's name, if the presentation. Okay, so the session is being recorded. Thank you, Grace. The session is being recorded and will be available later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Catherine Van Asselt said, how many days have you been successful outcomes for clients on average in your own experiences? You know, I've actually tried this experience with clients, and it's recommended that you do it for at least 3 weeks. It really depends on if it's like more of an early childhood experience. And what I've seen, those tend to have a lot of layers to them, versus if it's been someone who's been sexually traumatized later in life or closer to the time that they come into therapy. So what I found with the early childhood experiences and whatnot is they have a whole lifetime of building up different ways that they scan their environment. You know, with this type of protocol, you know, you're going to need more than just this protocol with that population. However, it begins to place their brain in the right direction because they've been accumulating different ways, because we tend to acquiesce with our brain. They continue to find ways to seek out and note threats. This is a way to begin to change that current.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown.
Brian asked a question about any books or reading materials for us, our clients, you would recommend. Beda, are there any that you've come across that specifically deal with sexual trauma?
This protocol is actually available in the APA, excuse me, in the APA manual, APA website. So you can literally download every aspect of how to, the worksheets, how to do it. It has a therapist manual and it has the worksheet manuals. In reference, and that's what I found with me, and that has really worked with my trauma clients, is to be able to start with a psychoeducational portion, to be able to help them understand what common reactions they're experiencing in order to help them start pinpointing these elements, and so they can start working on resolving that. When it comes to the behavioral sexual responses, so I want to make it clear that they've been able to resolve the cognitive piece thoroughly prior to working on the behavioral part. So for me, this protocol has been extremely valuable for my clients.
Okay, very good. Caitlin asked, any tips on helping clients create safe and affirmative sexual scripts, either with self or with partners?
Do you want to answer that, or?
You can go right ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think along the lines with what I was referring to earlier, combining the intervention model that Dr. Brown just presented with us, alongside with soothing, self-compassionate techniques, really helps to, I want to say attack, but it really helps to desensitize these internal, intense self-critical thoughts that really affects the person's mood stability, and it affects their behavioral responses, and it affects their emotional stability.
Yep, and it's one, by and large, the two books that I recommend if you're just getting started on your journey and working with people with trauma. One is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, a really good read, probably the foremost in research as it relates to trauma currently. And Dr. Judith Herman. Her book is probably one of the quintessential works, one of the earliest works. She's probably the one of the creators, or certainly co-creators of traumatology in our field. So it's a good base book.
I'd like to add a little bit more in reference to the arousal non-concordance research and education portion. Dr. Emily Nagoski, she has amazing TED Talks in reference to this. She will give you the neurological back end as well, like we did a little bit. Dr. Brown really went a little deeper on this, but Dr. Emily Nagoski has excellent literature as well on this.
Okay, and I'll put this book out here again. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. There's a few people that were asking about that book. The Body Keeps the Score. I was fortunate enough to go through a training with Dr. van der Kolk, super nice individual, has a Dutch background. Really enjoyed his lectures. If you ever have a chance to go through one of his trainings, exceptional. Okay, Yvette asked for the TED Talk.
Oh, okay, yes. How can I access this? I want to give you guys the link. So
you may be able to pull it off of your, there you go. Oh, now we can see everyone.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. It's always nice to see. I wish we could have this as we were going through the slide set so I could see people's faces. Of course, then I would know if I messed up. They're like, "Oh, what was that word he said? That's not in the English dictionary."
Okay, give me a second here. Almost there.
Okay, Beda's going to provide this link in the chat area.
Okay, found it. Perfect. Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you, Dr. Catherine.
Giving me some ads over here.
Grace Hockenberry, she's one of our wonderful helpers here. She said the video will be available on a YouTube channel, the school's YouTube channel specifically. Do you have access or a link to that channel?
Grace, I'll put it in the chat. Give me a second.
Thank you very much. And so I think that was Jennifer Tooth.
Hi, Dr. Brown.
Hello, Jennifer Tooth. She is going to put the link to the YouTube channel, and I believe that you'll be able to get all of our recordings over this week in that channel. So it'll be a really good resource to have.
Give me more than a week, but we'll get it.
Yeah. You may want to wait till like maybe next Monday or after. However, our helpers are very efficient. So I know we're coming to the end of our meeting, and I just want to say thank you all for being so gracious again. And I was very happy to join with Beda. I've known her for years, and she still claims me, and so it's been great to align with her, and really outstanding job for a first time through. Thank you for your questions and for your patience during our presentation. I hope that you all have a wonderful Monday.
Yes, and I want to thank you, Dr. Brown, for believing in me, and thank you so much in your time this morning. And I wish you a safe and please stay healthy throughout your time.
You all stay safe out there. Make sure you wash your hands.
Please.
Stay
Thank you,
isolated.
everyone, for your comments.
That's right.
You guys are really validating a lot of my experience. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Real quick, whoever's still here, the presentation that was scheduled with Judine Sable in another room at 10 o'clock has been canceled. So if you were going to that one's been canceled. Jordan, are you logged in as CMHC? Yeah, you are.
Oh my God, you're so right. Because I was doing this yesterday. Oh my God.
Is Grace still here?
Where am I? Let me log out and log. Well, yeah, let me log back out and log back into mine.
Okay, and who is, yes, Elizabeth, this is the correct one. Who is our room monitor for this presentation? Is someone present?
It's me, Nicole Noel.
Okay, Nicole, can you please stop the recording from the last one and start the new one?
Sure.